all of our appointed council members are here. And we don't have Kim, and Mike is sitting far away from me because he's sick. So that's what we've got going on.
I have cold too, so.
Good baby.
Well, then I'm just gonna move back over.
A little double whammy, Jay.
Open forum. Everybody's on the agenda. So anybody want to say anything to the council? Seeing none, close the open forum, move on to the consent agenda. Typical 3 things on the consent agenda. Unless you want to pull something or add something to the agenda.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second.
Oh, he's fast today.
He's on top of it. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Carries. Moving on. So the first thing we've got in our packet is likely everyone has heard via the paper and other such things that that the results of the election, the elected candidate has decided not to serve, which is
Unfortunate.
unfortunate. It is very unfortunate.
It is.
So the way that this works, and I'll just explain this, I think the council probably already understands this, but just so that it's on the record, the way this works is that was a special election to fulfill 2 years of an existing term. So immediately after that election, the term of the appointed person expires, and then the elected person is supposed to start. So at the first meeting following the election, we could have sworn in Pete, or at any point thereafter, but Jonathan's tenure was completed on the election day. And then he would have either been reelected or else his tenure would be over. So as we stand right now, we have four council people, and then the resolution that we have right now, 2018-23, is the declaration of a vacancy on the council. So this is what we had to do when Tracy left, it's what we had to do when Dave left. So what this means, and I think it's important to understand the consequences of this, is that we will be appointing someone to a 2-year term following the resolution of the vacancy, and then there will have to be another special election to fulfill the 2 years,
No.
the remaining
No.
2 years.
Nope,
No.
no more special elections.
I
The
thought
law
we just
There's
says,
only
Point.
2 years left.
the law says, and there's more than 2 years today, right? There's 2 years in a month.
Okay,
But the law says if we're already past the last day to file for the next regular election,
gotcha.
then you don't have to hold a special election.
Gotcha. So then it's just appointment for the last two.
You'll make
2
an
years of
appointment.
that.
You have, as a matter
Gotcha.
of fact, you have to make an appointment.
All right.
You don't have any other options to fill that seat.
Yeah.
If we have interested candidates.
Yeah.
Yep.
you
And so
do, so
the
I'm sure you
first
will.
the first step we have to do is we have to pass the resolution declaring the vacancy, which is the acknowledgement of Pete's choice to not serve.
I motion we approve resolution 2018-23.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I guess I'm disappointed that Pete didn't do it, and I understand, I guess, why. But I was looking forward to working with him, so.
Yeah, I mirror that. Anything else? All right, hearing nothing. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so that carries. So I have not talked with Jonathan about his willingness to continue or to put his name in for a position like that, or an additional 2-year term like this. I did receive an email from Craig saying that he was interested. So we need to put the call out there, interested candidates.
Will they do the same process then that like Jonathan and I did, is sending in a letter or something expressing, or I guess Craig kind of did with the
Yeah,
email,
Craig already
right?
did, with his email.
So there isn't any set way to do this. It's entirely up to you how you want to. If you want to just advertise for the vacancy and see if candidates are willing to submit a letter of interest, I think that works.
I think that works.
If
too.
you have particular things you want to ask them about before you would appoint them, or if you want to know something in particular that you want them to address in the letter, you can state that. We've had actual formal interviews before as well, so it's up to you what you're comfortable with.
I think it'd be nice to advertise and see what we have, but then at the next meeting, to kind of try to move it along so that we really can have somebody in place by the first of the year.
Yeah. Well, I think we want it in place before that.
We can get advertisements out tomorrow, although it won't be in the newspaper until next week.
Right.
You put it in the news? Excellent. You think you could actually make a little box ad too?
It can go on our Facebook page, our city Facebook page as well,
I think
right?
it should, yep.
Yeah, we'll get it out. We'll get the word out in other ways, but the newspaper's a
doing your
big one,
blog?
and we want.
I'll put it on there, yep. So we're gonna get the word out, we need to get candidates put together,
Do we want to put a deadline in there for submitting that, so we aren't just
Can we
keeping
do
it
it?
open to anybody just applying?
I feel
Why don't you
like,
say that you'll start reviewing candidates on the 12th?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
I
say.
would really like to have this settled sooner rather than later. So, yeah, I think that works.
Well, I think, but we have to be fair, if we have 10 people in there, you know, and who knows what we'll get after the election, you know.
We're at the 27th right now, or
Well, I think if they have it in by the end of the day on the 12th, that would give us a chance to look and see. I mean, if there's 2 or 3 candidates, it might be something that we could decide that evening versus if there's 10 or 12, right? Just- If we were so fortunate that that many people are interested.
So we would put a deadline for application of whatever.
Can we do it so
When's the
that we
meeting
get
on
them
the-
out in a,
on the
I mean,
12th?
can we get it?
well, if we,
we
Well, we'll
usually-
send them to you as we receive them.
I was
So
just-
deadline to receive applications would be maybe the 7th?
yeah, end of business day on the 7th.
I was
that
just
gives
thinking,
everybody
so
a
it's
week and a
time
half.
to be able to forward. I mean, I guess we could get them before the meeting. I just don't want to get them like at, you know what I mean? Like, get 3 more that, again, that's if people do this.
Is
but-
that's not been our
Right.
record on this sort of
You never
issue?
know.
Yeah,
So-
maybe it's different this time.
So do we want to do the 7th or do we want to do the 12th? What do we want to do?
Well,
Or even
if we
like,
wait till the 12th, we won't have a chance
That's
to
right.
see
Review
those
them?
Let's do the
applications
7th.
until.
Okay.
Let's do the 7th.
That's really what I was getting
The
at.
reason I'm trying to avoid using a deadline at all is because if you get none, and you said deadline, then do we have to go back and talk about the whole process again?
Uh-huh.
Whereas if you just say, we'll accept candidates until we fill the position, we're gonna start reviewing them on the 12th, and we'll look at anybody who's had their candidacy in on the 7th, on the 12th, and then it's
But
not a deadline, it's just
If you
kind
word
of
it like that, that
timeline.
we would consider making an appointment as soon as the December 12th meeting,
Yeah,
if we had qualified.
if there are any
Applicants.
candidates in by the 7th.
Hmm?
Sure.
Does that make sense to the newspaper person in the back? Okay, but we'll figure that out.
Okay, so just shout out to the community to come and, if you're interested, indicate such interest. All right, so we're gonna move on then, unless you guys have more to talk about with that. All right, so we're gonna move on to Sawtooth Bluffs. So why don't you come up, Linda? Lisa,
Lisa.
you started the towel. Should've just said
They're both owls.
Ms. Kerr.
Well, at least you got that right.
Yeah.
Some people
right.
don't pronounce my last name right either, so.
How
They
can
say
you get
care.
that wrong?
Care, car, I've heard all sorts.
It's a double R. Anyway. All right, so you're here to present the Sawtooth Bluffs Master Plan. You were at the county on Tuesday, and the county approved it there.
Correct.
And so we already had the presentation about what the plan looks like. We did that last month, or was it earlier this month?
Last month,
Last month.
end of October.
Yep.
A month ago.
Yeah, and so now the concept that we have to do is we have to sign on to that plan, basically, right? Like, that's what you're here for, we have to approve and accept that plan?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, basically, I'm here. When I was here a month ago, I kind of presented it to you and said that please take the next month to look it over. If you have questions or concerns or comments, just to let me know. And then I would come back at the end of November and ask for your approval of the plan. And then, as I did with the county board, I'm also suggesting that we reconvene the Sawtooth Bluffs Steering Committee and have them be kind of the next step at trying to put together that joint powers agreement and board, which would be the managing body for this project. And Anton's already contacted me back and said that he's definitely interested, and I've had, including myself, I've had 4 of 7 that were already said they were willing to reconvene that committee, so.
So has anybody had any discussion with public on this at all? Have you had?
Well, the Parks and Trails Commission has had a public meeting and has had, there was a public process involved with that.
Right, but as counselors, I've actually had a couple people contact me about this that are not too excited. One, that we're doing a joint power agreement again. 2, that they kind of oppose that, well, they said both county and city, but they were city people that talked to me, worrying about that if we go forward with this, that we're spending more money, eventually building, maintenance, what we have to put into the project, and that we are not spending the money that we need to on the things that they felt we currently should be doing. Streets, infrastructure, we have the Highway 61 redesign, we have other things going on. So I just wondered if anyone else here had been contacted by any of their constituents to have any of those discussions at all. Because there was
I have
concern.
not.
The only feedback I've gotten from anybody is more in passing and just how excited they were about it.
I've received word from people that have concerns about the cost, but a lot of that was inquiry into where the money's going to come from and how that's going to work. And for planning, development, and operation. Like those are really the 3 things, because this is something that we're planning on putting some campground spots there. Is the income from the campground spot going to be able to offset the expense of operating a park of that size?
Well,
these are the questions that I have, because largely I expect that this is going to be maintained by the city parks department.
We haven't made any commitments like that. We haven't made any commitments on what
I suppose
money
that's
you
what we
would
have to
spend
get
on
together.
anything or
Well,
how it would be maintained.
and my understanding is that when Lisa was here last time, we talked about that this was all developed and drawn together as a potential, but that not all things had to go in. Not any of it really had to go in. It could all be changed yet again.
Right.
Correct.
So I think people had a real question as to, the people who contacted me had a real question as to why are we designing these particular things if that's not the direction we're going? I'm in on it a little late to give that kind of information, so that's why I kind of wanted to talk about it
Yeah, I
tonight
think
and say
it's
this
a
is
little
what I'm.
misleading to say that we might redesign the whole thing. And it's not that we wouldn't
Right.
end up having to do that at some point, but this is a clear intention to go this direction. There's a few points that I think are worth making with anybody that has any concerns like that. The steering committee was very clear about the need for an operational plan to be developed before anything is constructed. So each time an element is talked about being constructed, there needs to be an operational plan that we can understand how the maintenance is going to occur, who's going to pay for it. And then there's an opportunity for the boards to make decisions if they're being asked for resources, which they may not be, whether they're willing to do that or not. So we don't have to make any commitments about building anything until we know how it's going to be maintained. And
I feel like this aspect of it is similar to, like a preliminary plat, right? It's like an idea of like, this is the idea of what we want to try and do or what it wants to happen with this property. Is it worth expending the resources, the time in the steering committee based on feedback? Because there has been a lot of feedback. I mean, the feedback that the group got from, and it was both ways, right? It was people
Right.
up on Ski Hill Road, about traffic. There's many concerns and many positives as well. But it would be like, it's basically moving to that next step. And, I'm happy that I was able to eke out the one vote and like just, keep serving on that, because I don't know, I've been mostly involved since the beginning of that, and
Like I said, I feel like I'm not informed enough just coming on this year and trying to learn so many different things and have a lot of numbers floating in my head for everything that I've been doing this year. But I just wanted to talk about some of those things because I've actually had, in the last couple weeks, people that have reached out. So, and maybe because it's after election now and people feel like, okay, I know who I can talk to or whatever it may be. I just wanted to let people here know that I'm hearing some of this, and people are, not that people aren't excited either, but, again, transparency came out, and dollars, where are we spending our money? So as we have
I
a
think
lot of
that's-
projects
yeah.
going on, I think people are very concerned about where their money's going.
And we've heard a lot, I think a lot of those kind of comments through the planning process, but to be clear, this isn't a detailed plan. This is a concept plan that establishes kind of the broad parameters of what could happen at Sawtooth Bluffs. And before anything would be developed on that site, there would have to be a much higher level detail for the plans for that particular activity or infrastructure, whatever it may be, along with financial cost plans, operational and maintenance, long-term maintenance plans, and who would be responsible for those. This kind of is the next step in the process to begin the conversation of if we're approving the plan, both the city and the county, how do we move forward with anything happening up there? And the joint powers seems to be the mechanism for that to happen. Now, I have a lot of questions about how that joint powers is going to get set up and how that might work, because, the details of that are really important, I think, to both us and the county. And we haven't had, city council have had, zero conversation about that. And I don't think the county board has had any conversation about the details of what a joint powers agreement might look like. So that, I think, if there's some kind of a draft comes out of the steering committee back to both the city and the county, we're going to be involved with making sure that that's the way we want this facility or operation to be structured. So there's still, I think, a considerable amount of work to do before there's anything that's going to go forward, other than acknowledging that we have a plan that is the first step of the process.
So then, my question would be, and two things can happen: we approve it, or if it were denied tonight, what happens either way? If we move forward and said, yes, we approve, or if we deny, what happens? Which I know probably will not happen, but I just...
Well, I don't know about what happens if it gets denied, but I think if it moves forward, then we have that opportunity to start trying to meet with the user groups who plans, and Lisa maybe can answer this better than me, but at least my take on it would be, and my representation with the council on it would be, is how exactly, first informing the understanding, because it is both county and city property involved in the project. I don't think the county, just thinking of how that property works, it probably wouldn't really work with the regional designation if the city piece was carved out, and vice versa if the county piece was carved out.
Likely not, just because of the scope of the
Right.
project.
And the connectivity, I guess, to existing things, so maybe it would, maybe make it not work anymore if we denied it, or, but I guess I'd just look at that, like, how can we come up with a clear partnership with the county in then how we manage the different user groups that want to build out the projects.
Well, and that, in essence, would say that we would move forward and spend the money to do it.
And that's the
And the money to do
question,
what?
To move forward with this full project.
and do the additional
There's
planning
no-
that's
there's
necessary.
no commitment of any
No, we'd have
funds.
to come to an agreement on the joint powers agreement
I
first.
think for the people who contacted me, I think that was their question as to, if we continue to move forward with this, we're spending our time and our resources as counselors. And so then it feels to them that that's the direction that we're moving in, and in a way, money and time is being committed to that. So their question was, you know, are we in this? If we kind of keep moving, at one point, we could back out, but would we?
I think if there could be, I mean, yeah, if I didn't think that the city was getting a fair shake with if there was some sort of disagreement and like, just like clear point that we couldn't, you know, like there was some impasse in the joint powers agreement, and that wouldn't be like up to me to decide, but it would be what is brought back. If that was, then like that being that is the next step. I mean, it seems like that is a spot where we could say like, no, this isn't fair for the city. And I mean, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but I think that there is opportunities. It isn't like, let's do this, and then it's just like, oh,
Right.
guess what? Now the city's on the hook for $100,000 of maintenance a year going forward, and there's no stopping this.
What am I-
Because
what am
then,
I-
in order to even make it happen, I mean, once the joint powers thing, if we can come to terms with that, there's still the whole aspect of getting the actual regional designation. So it's not, you know,
I view this, where we're at right now, more so at the end of the first stage of this whole this whole situation. The master plan for the Sawtooth Bluffs is a requirement for us to get the regional designation, for us to apply for funding, to be able to pursue the further steps of this.
Okay.
So the master plan right now has been developed, you know, under the scrutiny of the steering committee and public comment, of which they received a ton of public comment, it seems. With all of that information together, that's kind of the end product. So now we've got this thing. If we sign on to this thing and say, hey, this is the master plan, we approve this, then that just opens the door for us to move into the joint powers conversation, and also, you know, continue that application process towards the legacy funds, which would be the funds that, you know, what I'm understanding we're expecting to use to actually construct such a thing. And so that's how I view this step. Now, on that note, I still have a question about funding for the planning. You know, I wonder how much time and energy have we put into it thus far? Because I know that plan was done largely or in partnership with ARDC, correct?
Right, and there was a grant, the STAR grant,
Okay.
with both the city and the county splitting the match for
Okay.
that. That's what paid for ARDC to help us in the creation of the plan.
So rem-
$15,000 star grant.
15, yes.
Yep.
We each spent $7,500 to match.
That sounds right.
I think it
We
was
each, the 7,500 was the
37.5,
match,
I
so
think.
30,
Was it?
yeah.
37.5 was the match by the city, 37.5 by the
And
county,
15 for the total
and
cost.
Correct.
7,500 from the grant.
And,
That's
well,
what
you
I
know,
was
it's not
thinking.
been a lot of time commitment, but I think your point is still well taken, that as we're working on a project like this, it's displacing our ability to work on something else.
Mhm.
And so, that's just something that's worth recognizing. And even if you approve this tonight, time is not of the essence on doing the next steps. And if you decide that there are 3 or 4 other priorities that are more important, and we decide we're not going to push hard to get a joint powers together in January or February or something like that, I mean, we're not necessarily missing an opportunity. But if you do decide that this is a priority, then this is an important step in making that a possibility.
You know, I would like to offer a motion to approve the plan, but approve it with the condition that it's contingent upon arrival at some kind of an acceptable management agreement between the city and the county, because I think that's the real key to this moving from where we are now to being possible, because without a management agreement, and I'm surprised we've waited this long in the process to have a conversation about that, but,
I think that's been intentional,
well,
which we can talk more about if you get a second, I suppose.
Well, there's a
Well-
motion. So, I mean, we should follow through on the motion.
I'd make a
So-
second.
Motion and a second, now we can discuss. Okay, go.
I think my questions, my concerns have been raised. And as we talk about some things that are coming up, truthfully, now that at least have 4 of us in place. We have a 5th to fill yet, but I would like to see us talk about some strategic planning. And is there something in place right now, a current strategic plan in place for the council that we have following projects, or is it just kind of as we?
We have.
No,
We have a
you're
five-year
really
plan.
at the end of planning that's been done. It's time to revisit.
Which
I
is
have
what
had,
we talked about it, right?
Yeah.
But we wanted to wait till after the election.
Right.
So that's, it's on
Yeah.
our like ongoing business, I believe, to
I
like have
I
this
think some of
conversation.
those things, you know, I'm okay adding something in, because by taking the next step, by no means am I saying, yes, I'm rubber stamping this and passing it through. But I think that I've had a few people mention that too, as to what really are our priorities. And obviously, you know, I could not answer that question coming in and not knowing if I'd even be staying. But I'm really interested in us working on a strategic plan, and what things do we see as really important, do we want to work on, and what do we kind of want to get accomplished and set in place. Because the public has been asking for that as well, so.
Yeah, we've had a list of council priorities, and of course, we started knocking some of those things off the list with the Public Works Garage and the boat launch facility and the Highway 61 project, kind of getting settled in. You know,
Yeah,
but the
but
question is, what's next on the list?
Well, and with a strategic plan, you actually have your timelines there, and you kind of keep track of
How can we
whether
manage
monthly
it?
or quarterly, what have we accomplished here, what have we done, who's done it? And that's really what I'm looking for, because I think somebody pulling out of the back of their head, oh yeah, we talked about doing this, yeah, let's do that. Or somebody who's been here a while knowing something, and somebody coming in, you know, all that learning curve. I'd like to see a formalized strategic plan, and I think it would help the people at City Hall as well, going, this is what the council wants me to work on. So
There's
when
no doubt that's true.
when Joe Public comes in and says, what are you doing this for? City Hall can say, because I am directed to do this, and it's right here. So I think it helps on
We're going to
many.
answer it a little different than that, I hope. But,
Yes,
but at least that'll be
I do
part of
too,
it.
but
It,
that's
yeah,
an
it
example.
helps us
So-
manage. It helps us manage
Yeah.
when other projects come up as well. So in speaking to the motion, I wonder, just a logistical question: does making the approval of the city contingent on a future activity that has not yet happened? Does that mean that the plan is not actually approved until we have a management agreement in
Let's
place?
say
Yes.
that would be the case.
Because does that then hinder us in the regionally specific or regionally significant process, or is that something that
I
we're
don't know
not
that we're going to
thinking
be able to
about?
submit that application without having that.
The management
that-
plan in place?
That agreement in place, because if we don't know how it's operated,
Why would we want
I
it?
mean, we can't even, I don't
Great.
think, who applies? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question, and I
Great.
think that needs to be resolved.
Great. I'm glad
And
I-
I
put it
can-
in the forefront to say, this is the next step in this process, is to get a management plan that's acceptable to both the county and the city, and.
Yeah.
then
And so
we'll-
that-
The
then
idea of
we'll
having
move
a
on.
steering committee work on that, it's good to have more perspectives and voices in the conversation, but in the end, really the voices that are most important are your voices and the county board's voices. Like, that needs to be the focus of this management plan.
Well, I suggested that to Heidi yesterday, that, you know, we all need to be sitting at the same table, having this conversation to make sure that we're all on the same page, not just city administrator and county administrator, or, you know, one commissioner and one county, city council member. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's got to be all of us that are, same like with the Y agreement. We don't want to, I don't think we want to be in a situation where we're on the outside and
Right.
get handed the agreement, and we want to be partners to draft that agreement.
Well, part of why, if I may, part of why I suggested to have the original Sawtooth Steering Committee reconvene is because a lot of the questions that you guys have been bringing up and the points that you guys have been bringing up came up in our regular conversations at these steering committee meetings. So we already know that there are things that need to be addressed, and part of that joint powers board. and that joint powers agreement. So, and that's part of having that background knowledge already would be good moving forward. And then as far as, funding goes and this project goes, as I mentioned last time I was here, this is not going to be done in a year. This is not going to be even done in 5 years. I'm going to say it's, at least a decade or more before, and even then, it might not be finished. It might change. And the idea is to start with something that can generate revenue, like the campgrounds and things of that nature. Maybe user fees, all that kind of stuff can get worked out. And then to build amenities and structures as the trails become more available and more built. Because the city and the county isn't going to be responsible for the entire 640 acres. That's kind of how this was created, because most of these trails are going to be created and basically funded through the user groups and maintained through the user groups. So it's not all going to be on the heads of the city and the county, so to speak. So I just wanted to and then each project will have its own process, so its own financial process, its own funding process, its own public process. So everything that does go into that project, there will still be a say from everybody.
All right. So just a clarification on the STAR grant. $7,500. Each of us put in $7,500,
No.
or
No.
$7,500. Each of us put in $3,750.
The STAR grant itself was $7,500, and then the match was $7,500, which was split in half between the city and the county, so $3,750 each.
So then that gave us 15 grand to work with. for-
Correct.
And
With the ARDC, that went to them, right?
yeah, it all went to them. And then we've spent staff time, like county has spent staff time, the city has spent staff time on it. All right, but that's hard to quantify that, like how much time has already been spent on.
Well,
on
in
that.
some of these grants, you can use those as
Matching hours.
matching hours for the
Okay.
grants too.
Is that what the county did?
No,
Used your
we-
time for it, or?
No, we didn't use my time for it. I mean, well, I take that back. We, for additional, for after, because we actually went past the 6 months. And so after that, to make it kind of match up for the grant, we used those hours after the 6-month time period.
Okay. All right, does anybody else have any other questions? We have a motion to approve the Sawtooth Bluffs Master Plan contingent on the completion of a management plan, which would be taken up by the joint powers, or by the steering committee as part of the joint powers. negotiation.
Ultimately approved by the city,
Yeah,
the
city.
county.
Contingent
or-
on the
or
management
city
plan
or
with the
City
county.
or the county, if it would be a singular.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still no guarantee that it's a joint powers operation.
Okay.
We don't know that.
So we'll just make it be for a management plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, worked out between the city, county, user groups and things like that.
Yep.
All right, so that's the motion. Any last comments on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.
All right, so next thing we've got some follow-up from last week. So when we made our motion last meeting to draft a resolution with findings based on our denial of the Berner variance for height. That's in your packet, 2018-24. The criteria and the findings are really the things that we need to pay attention to on this one. I spoke with Chris this afternoon in regards to the language of the findings, and basically what we need to do is we need to agree as to whether or not those findings are accurate, that whether or not that's how we want to word and say the response to this, and then in order to finalize that, we need to approve this resolution. So criteria number 1, the variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. And the finding is that the additional building height would detract from other existing uses. consistent with the comprehensive plan. And then we've got the unnecessary interference with public view corridors in the downtown zone. And in order to protect those public places around there. Criteria or finding number 3 is proposal seeks to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the zoning ordinance, and we don't feel that, I think that one's really the big one for me, is that don't feel like it is unreasonable for them to operate that in a 30-foot building. Criteria number 4, plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the landowner. And there are other properties in the community that have been successfully developed on 25-foot lots. So the variance, if granted, would not alter the essential character of the locality. And then that finding is that the essential character is partially defined by the 30-foot limit. Whether or not that's the way we want it to be, that is obviously the way we want it to be. And because that ordinance has been in place for quite some time, all of the buildings downtown, with the exception of the air conditioning unit on the top of the East Bay, fall within that criteria. So those are the findings. Do you agree on those findings? Do you disagree with those findings? Would you like to have them worded any differently? Would you like to have anything added, detracted? I mean, if we do choose to add or take away or change anything, we should definitely weigh in with Chris and see what he says about it. But
Well, since I made the motion at the last meeting, I would make motion to accept Resolution 2018-24. I think the findings that are made here are consistent with the conversations we've had at the past 2 council meetings, and, I think the denial of this variance is a result of that.
okay, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'd second it,
Okay,
unless you want to.
That's all right.
motion and a second. Any further discussion?
You can see, first of all, this process is the exact same process you use when you're approving a variance. You look at you look at these findings, you determine that they like what they say, and you're passing it. But if you read some of these, I think you can see where the idea of precedent might occur to people, because we're making a pretty broad statement when we say the essential character is partially defined by the 30-foot height limit. That seems to be broadly applicable to anyone who might ask for a height variance in that zone.
Yeah.
Yep. That is quite clear. I had the opportunity to speak to a member of the planning commission today, and they said that they felt okay with the direction that the council was making on this, because I know that it was approved by the planning and zoning commission, and then the council reversed that, and so I can't speak by any means for the entirety of the planning commission, but the at least that member said that they felt like that was.
Well, and I think, just in recognition of the planning commission's recommendation, the information that was presented at the first council meeting when this was brought up was different than the information that was presented at the planning commission. And I think that's why
Correct.
the confusion arose, and why we questioned what the plan really was meant to say, and whether or not it could comply with the height restrictions. It seemed that after that conversation and those discussions at those 2 council meetings, that seemed to be the case, at least in my mind.
Yep. Any other discussion? Motion is to approve resolution 2018-24. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, carries. Moving right along, so the AT group is the group that we've been working with for the new healthcare plan, or health insurance plan for city employees. Attached to our packet, we've got the agreement that we need to review and agree in order to get that in place, we are trying to get this, this health insurance plan, all buttoned up by the 1st of December?
We're already signed up, so.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the health insurance business associate agreement.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. For discussion, I have a couple of questions. Chris, it says in the memo that you've modified it. What did you modify?
That's correct.
Yeah, what did you modify?
Well, I added in, towards the end of the agreement, paragraphs H through, let's see, H through U were my additions.
Wow.
Oh,
That's
And-
his standard business
and
contract
how?
language.
Okay.
Okay.
okay, cool. So that actually that goes into my next one, my next question, which is in paragraph I. So all of these other liability, general liability, automotive liability, all of those, that's just a summary of what we already offer? Is that
No,
correct?
this is what we're requiring the AT group to have for their own coverage.
Oh, for their own coverage?
Yeah.
And this is something that they won't have any problem providing?
I'm not sure.
Have they approved this?
No.
Okay,
So I'll let you know.
all right. So basically what we're saying is we want the AT group to cover some of the liability for this.
Well,
Their
this
own
is,
interest.
this is
Their own
Chris's standard service contract language where we would always ask someone that we're doing business with to have insurance to cover their own
Cover their own
liability,
butts, gotcha.
among many other things that you can read in here.
Yep, okay. The rest of it was pretty clear. Chris, do you have anything else to say about that? That sounds about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, yes.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay, so, fantastico. We are at council and staff reports. There's nothing else that we want to add to the agenda, otherwise we would have already done it. So, Tim, what you got?
Nothing.
What? Well, I suppose it was Thanksgiving.
Right.
Turkey was great.
I smoked mine. It was good. Okay, Anton, what you got?
I had a couple communications about vehicle noise enforcement. A couple folks wondering about that and what the rules are on that and how you get that to stop. So one was engine braking, continual engine braking, which has been going on and on and on, and nothing seems to happen. We noticed that there is a sign saying vehicle noise ordinance is enforced when you're coming in from the east side of town, when you hit the city limits,
There was one the other way.
And the west.
and the west, but there's nothing on the gun farm,
I think that's true, yeah.
which is the only hill short of, I guess, the one coming down from the
Oh,
lumberyard.
so it's Jake break.
Yeah.
You
And,
know, the fact that we have an ordinance, I don't think it requires a sign to enforce it.
right, but it also seems like that even if there is enforcement, or I've personally actually called on one particular vehicle probably a half dozen times, and every time they go by, it's like they do it louder, just because they see my truck. So I don't know what that means, if they're not actually getting tickets or what, and so maybe that's too.
Question for the sheriff.
It would be.
Well, and how would they know who's called in to talk about them?
I don't know, probably just because, it's, you can hear them coming from pincushion, so you can, it's not like you're like, oh, it was earlier today.
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
if
oh,
somebody-
no, just wait outside your office in 35 seconds and they'll be coming by and Anyway, so that was one, but then also like four-wheelers in town. I know four-wheelers are allowed in town, but like the exhausts on some things are extremely loud, and I don't know if that qualifies or if that's also a question for the sheriff.
It is, yeah. We don't have any local ordinances that deal directly with four-wheelers, which is why they're allowed.
Yeah.
And, but there are state regulations about four-wheelers that I assume that the sheriff has the ability to enforce, but I wouldn't know. It'd be a good question for him.
So that would, but that, the vehicle noise side of it would, it's a vehicle, it would pertain to that just the same as anything, right?
Well, we really don't have vehicle noise. We have nuisance ordinances that I think can address either of those if we want them to. Although that would be fairly difficult for us to just do, much easier for the sheriff to be
Right.
involved in that, particularly with the four-wheeler, since we don't have any rules about that, but also for engine braking and other things.
Okay. And I guess I had another question. There is, I mean, I know it's not the first of the year yet, but as far as open seats on commissions, I think there are some openings.
Yes, there will be some.
And do we have to wait until after the first of the year so that there is?
We can
Yeah.
advertise though.
We'll be advertising throughout December.
Okay, that's what I was.
You'll make
kinda-
appointments your first meeting in January.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, so anybody that's interested in any of the open seats, there'll be advertisements going out and contact the city?
So we'll have some board members whose terms expire but are eligible to serve additional terms,
Yeah,
and we'll be in contact with them directly to just let them know. They need to just let us know in writing if they're interested in that.
okay,
We'll also advertise those seats so other people have an opportunity to apply for them. And there will also be some seats where the incumbent is not eligible to serve another term, and that we'll need to find some candidates for.
okay. That is all I have until somebody says something that makes me think of something else.
Got it.
YMCA board met on the 19th, so a week ago Monday. They reviewed, basically, I got there late, about 45 minutes late, because I started my new job, so I didn't want to leave early the first day. They were reviewing their contracts with the school, with the county. I think they have some real questions about some of the some of the writing, and some of the points in their contracts, which, I think we're aware of. But they were going to bring forward some things both to the county, to request of them to change. I think some of these things might be a little sticky. It's kind of how I see it going, but there is I'm a counselor, so they're a commissioner. There's a commissioner who represents on the Y board, so I guess it will be up to him to kind of figure out how he wants to have dialect with his fellow commissioners regarding some of these things. And then the Y needs to, it's time to renew their contract with the school. As we know, they don't have janitor services. They aren't receiving any payment for the time that the kids are coming over and using things. And there is going to be some discussion. They would like to keep everything very friendly, if possible, and have good dialect. So we'll see what comes forward.
Yeah, we certainly will.
Did we ever get that? Thank you for saying something that made me think of something. Did we ever get that number from Brady?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to push. We need
Yeah,
to, we need to
I
remind
want to
them.
know that. I even made a little note that said, how much does Anton pay for it, but
Okay. That's
No,
wait a minute.
that'd be
That's
great.
not the number you're talking about.
Huh? Yeah,
no, he's
I wanna
talking
know.
about the.
The
you
difference
know,
between if we just let the county levy the whole
Yes.
thing.
One
Yeah.
of I did have a conversation, and I think from what I understand, we can talk about this more later, but what I understand is it would be basically impossible, I think, for the county to take all of that on, like for 19, if it, say it came out where it was less expensive for everybody to have the new agreement, just have it be agreement between the city and the county bows out, and then city residents' taxes would be
At the county level.
at the county level would
Yeah.
be raised, but it doesn't sound like the county they would have to find, basically, because of where their levy was set, they would have to find, $140,000 to cut out of their budget, which they obviously couldn't do in order to
I
not
was gonna
raise
say, I
up
don't
their.
know
Not
that I ever
necessarily.
want to say obviously can't do, because you can. It might be
Right.
difficult, but you can.
But, I mean that because of, because this is now, of course, which I don't know, it's not maybe our fault, but it's after the initial levy's been set, right? So if the initial levy had been set. and
Oh,
that-
yeah, it cannot go any higher.
That's what
It
I'm
can go
saying.
lower, but it cannot go higher.
Right.
Yep.
So, right. So, I don't know what the number is, and maybe we'll have to wait for that, I guess, before we have that conversation.
Well, they're gonna need to set their levy before we can finalize that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they've already done their preliminary, obviously, to the public.
So they
And
can't
once
raise
you
it.
release that, you cannot go above that number. So,
Right, but they have to set their levy
yeah,
in December, so
yeah.
they
But
don't
it-
have, we don't have a lot of time.
I think what he's saying is if we decided to bow out and it ended up raising it and making the levy go,
If we took
even
the
if it's a tenth of
$140,000 out that the county wants us to chip in, but the numbers that we get back on what the effect would be countywide,
right,
right? That, what part we brought up in that meeting,
Yep.
the difficulty, and they might all agree, like, yeah, no, that makes way more sense to spread this out throughout the county versus how it's currently set or what they're currently asking. The issue then becomes, where do they find $140,000
Right.
at this time of
Yeah.
Because that has to go
In
into the
their
county budget.
in their
yeah.
reserves, it's probably the only place, might be other places. but-
Well, we
Well,
I
I
think
mean,
we need to have
it's
that
not
conversation.
impossible for that to happen by December, for us to participate in that in some way to make it easier. I don't know that it gets us anywhere in terms of, one more year isn't, if we could come to some agreement on where we want to be at the end of the year, if we know that this is it. But honestly, I'm really skeptical that that's going to be the direction we go. I don't think it makes any sense that the county will think it's a good idea to do this when they see the numbers, so,
for us to bow out.
yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have to get those numbers though.
Well, maybe not, right, maybe not completely.
Well, yeah, because
but
if we're
that-
going to
but
have
that-
our budget meeting, we probably should have an idea by that day of whether we're going to,
This will be one of the topics for your next week's work session. It's really one of the major variables that's
Yeah.
left in our budget.
Mm-hmm.
And like we said, I think when you met with the county board, it's not likely that this is going to be solved before you have to set a final levy. And setting the final levy does not commit you to any contribution to the county, but you might have to set aside a conservative number in the levy just to give yourself the flexibility to make a decision in the future. So that's something we'll spend a little time on next week, and then we'll have to go back and just kind of cover where you went and how you decided on that on
and
the
do we
12th.
have to have, did we ever have an actual agreement with them regarding the Y, a city-county joint, was there an official
We have an
agreement?
agreement with the county.
We have to
yeah.
agree with the
Okay.
county now with the Y. The
Right.
Agreement with the Y.
Does that now change, or is it null and void because they went and changed their agreement?
It's not null and void. I shouldn't say it's not. I don't think it is. Maybe we want to make that case, although I don't know if that is useful to us right now. It's certainly less easy to understand how it works, and so it at least needs to be modified so that the language matches up with reality.
So we probably need to have something new put together
Oh, yeah.
that's,
If we decide we want to continue in a relationship with them, I think that's probably the best place to do.
Have one
is just have
rewritten.
a new agreement. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want me to keep going? I had a
Yeah, you
couple
have
things.
more. Go
Okay.
ahead, keep going.
So, I believe the last meeting, we talked about a letter to public about removing like trailers, additional cars, all that stuff off city streets. Were those able to be sent out?
Yep, we mailed out letters. We also have an advertisement we're going to be putting in the newspaper that's just a little more general about if you're parking something in the street, it's snowplow season, please move it. Thanks.
How many letters did you have to send?
I don't know.
Oh,
The list that we started with was
30.
Yeah, 30 some.
Okay. And the last thing that I had was, thank you very much for the email that Patrick sent out with just some examples of performance evaluations
Yep.
that we could do. Did anybody take a look at them? Is there anything in particular? Obviously, I shared what I found on the City of Duluth website. Things can be adapted to fit us, but I didn't know if there's anything that stuck out to people if they liked, if we want to move forward with it, if we want to wait until we have a fifth person. But I do believe that we owe it to our administrator to have that done, because it is my intention that at some point in 2019, staff, department heads should be doing those. I think we need to move towards that dialogue and discussion, and I think all of our employees deserve to have those done.
I totally agree, and that also, that goes directly into, a statement that the Personnel Committee made earlier this year, saying that we need to get the, reassessment or the evaluation of city employees on a regular schedule. Just for the sake of having it done and having that oversight into the positions, not as a like, oh, you're not doing your job kind of thing, but to make sure that the employees have an opportunity, at those times to formally make their case about anything that situations that might have arisen in their positions.
It's not what we've used them for. An evaluation, an annual evaluation is more of just a remembrance of what's occurred,
Mhm.
and there shouldn't be news in it, and there shouldn't be anything
Correct.
that they didn't understand already in it.
It's meant
It's
to be
more
a
about
dialogue.
talking about goal setting than anything else, and some accountability around what we want people to be accomplishing.
And
We do
there's-
allow, of course, that if an employee wants to question something about that, but if we've run into that situation, we've already made a mistake at some point. So-
Yeah, that's not a time to bring up any disciplines per se, because you're right, people should be hearing on a regular basis if there's things that they need to improve, and that's, coaching. I don't know how many department heads are currently doing them. I don't know how many even feel comfortable, but there are people out there, even very close by, that are familiar with doing them, are very experienced, that we could get someone in to help department heads to have a session as to how to make meaningful. It's practice, there's no doubt. But I just think that it would be a really positive step for our employees. I'm sure department heads are gonna not like me very much for a while, but
Well,
I think
they are,
we
some
can
of them
already
doing
doing
them
it.
already.
doing them.
Yeah.
And we have provided some training because no one's comfortable.
Yeah.
Right, it's not a comfortable, that's part of the training too, is, why people don't like to do it.
Yep.
And there's some real, obvious in the hindsight psychology around
Mhm.
what happens with them and why.
So I'm wondering how the rest of the council would like to proceed in working on the administrators.
I think that there's a lot of value in waiting until we have a fifth
Okay.
to make sure that we have everybody on the same page. I think that this is a great first step, sending them out, so that everybody has seen what the all of us have seen what the some of the options are. I got lots of really good ideas from looking at those. I think that it makes sense for us to get together as a council when we have 5 and just say, how do we want this to look? Because especially if we're going to have that be a template that we're going to apply to more than just Mike, then I think we have to take a look at what we already have. We have to take a look at how we've been operating, and then we can go from there.
I'm perfectly fine with mine being different than everybody else's. I think that's appropriate.
Yes.
For non-department heads, their job descriptions are used as the basis, like those are the things that we're telling them how they're doing. And you might want to take a look at mine too, I can email that around. For me, the the rubric style, where you're going to put a score against something, is not particularly useful. Anecdotal discussion about things is better, and then really what I would want to get out of it is goal setting. So we talk about and agree on what you want to see me accomplish, and then we're continually reviewing that, and then my review is a summary of how we did.
Well, I think it would be beneficial too for this process to maybe even begin with the council setting its priorities and having some goal setting objectives, and then following up with, you, Mike, as the administrator, and what the goals and expectations would be of you then. I mean, if we don't have our own priorities put in place, how do we tell Mike what his priorities should be?
Right, but I don't want to wait 6 or 8 months or until we get a strategic plan in place either, because I think there's other things that we can have dialogue with Mike about.
Yeah.
Before that point, it isn't that it always has to be just goals, but you do talk about, how do we feel we interact with Mike? How do we feel Mike interacts with, and it's talking to some of the other people who he works with, other department heads. What's your interactions? How do you feel like he deals with things well? What are the strong points? What are points you'd like to see him work on? Those kind of things that we can come back and say, here's the feedback that we want to give you. And it isn't always, I don't feel that they're always negative. They're meant to really help. If you're doing it the right way, they're meant to help someone. So whether it's goal setting, whether it's talking about, behaviors, or gee, Mike's crew says he always comes in 20 minutes late every single solitary day, or he always takes a 2-hour lunch, or those kind of things that you go back to. And
No, there he goes.
so, I want to make it easy things.
Sounds like you read his last one.
He hasn't had one, I thought.
Oh.
So, but that you go back and work with somebody on those things, because, maybe he says, I've dealt with it. You have employees that constantly come late, and it's like, what's going on? Somebody might turn around and eventually say, I have a daycare issue. I'm sorry. Okay, can we help you?
Yeah.
Can we move your hours? Would it work for us to say this person can then change their hours to be this, because it helps them, and at the same time, that person who we think is a really good employee is then going to work even harder for us. Those are the kind of things that, in very simple terms, that you can go through and work on before you even talk about these big, huge goals that we want to accomplish.
When I say goals, I mean, because of my position, they're often going to be tied directly to your goals.
Yes.
But there are other goals too that are just about me and what I do and how I do it. So, yeah, I think you're right on it with that.
I'm good. So once we have 5, I'll bring it up again.
Oh, well, we'll be on it. We'll be on it
We'll have 5 next week, or 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks, yeah.
Unless we have 20 people step forward saying, hey,
Right.
pick me.
Boy, that'll be exciting. Then we just punch
Wouldn't
him, punch him onto the commissions then. This is where you get to go. All right, so Monday we had a library board meeting. The library director and co-director and children's librarian have created an action plan for 2019, which is basically an offshoot of a strategic planning process that we did to set the activities of the library for 2019. And it's pretty. I think it's going to be very interesting. One of the things that the library has sought to do is to use the platform of the library to educate about diversity in our own community. And so the 3 elements that they chose to that the library board chose to pursue in 2019 is economic diversity, which I think is going to be really interesting to see. Teens and young teens, the tweens generation, or like tweens group, which is, no, seriously, it's going to be very interesting. I didn't know. I never know how to read your face, Anton. You always look pissed at me. And then
Move it along.
and then the third one is the Latinx, like the Latino Latina population, because we do have a fair number people in our community compared on, relative to our diversity, that are from Latin countries. So that's going to be very interesting. I have a copy of the plan if anybody wants to see it. We also set the calendar for 2019, and then on Tuesday morning we went to the county board meeting, and that was approved. The budget was approved by the county. So that was great. I met with the downtown business group, or the Grand Marais business group, and they're already deep into planning for Hygge, for the winter Hygge festival, and they did a great job with the shop local Saturday, and I think that the group has come together very nicely. Spoke with them a fair amount about the Highway 61 plan as well, and explained, this is why we're doing it the way we're doing it, and the construction and everything. There were definitely some concerns, but there also was a pretty strong consensus in the group that the downtown business group wants to be a part of the solution. They want to be a part of leading this charge to tell people it's not going to be so bad. We're going to keep a positive attitude about this. We're going to keep Grand Marais open for business. It's going to be all good, which I was really encouraged to hear. So we need to keep working with those folks, and to keep doing what we can to make sure that the downtown businesses are able to continue doing business, and at as high a level as they can during the construction. Also related to the construction, the Creative Economies Collaborative that we have empowered to help us with design has they are putting together a document that has suggestions and affirmations of some of the things that CJ brought to us, and it's going to be interesting to see that when they get that forward. Should have that by next meeting, I think. I spoke with some people about. I spoke with people about noise. I spoke with people about concerns about the YMCA contract negotiations, and a number of other things, really. Planning and zoning stuff. People had a lot of questions to ask about. What are we doing about infill housing? What are we doing to actually help increase affordable housing within the city? Are there zoning things that we can do to help make accessory dwelling units and other affordable options on properties that we already have available and appropriate for the residential zone? And that's something that I would really like to see the Planning and Zoning Commission take up, is policy. Like policy ideas of how would it impact the city if we took a look at the setbacks, if we took a look at the variance process itself, and then worked some of that into the ordinance, so that it made it easier for people to have those types of
Could
those
you
types
put
of
that
structures.
in writing so that we could hand that out to the planning commission? And because we've talked in general terms about wanting to address what we think are some deficiency areas, especially around the housing issue.
Well, we don't need a list of solutions yet.
I'm not suggesting solutions,
if you're gonna put in writing, like, I'd be even better
A
if somebody made a
request.
motion in a second and you vote on it. This is an issue we want the planning commission to study, and then we can send that to them in writing. They have talked about studying it, and at least at my perspective, the biggest barrier for them moving forward on it is just the lack of resources. It's a big conversation to look at all the different ways our zoning ordinance affects our ability to do more with housing, and also to think about the unintended consequences of making changes, or just the consequences of making changes, and making sure we're okay with that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I think we need to do it, but I think we should bring some help in to do it with us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Mike has suggested at past planning commission meetings, that if we are going to take this on, that it's going to be more than just him being able to do that, because he just doesn't have the time to
Correct.
be able to commit to that kind
Yes.
of a project. And, if we're going to do it, to what extent then are we,
Well, I'd
Yeah,
also
open
be,
the question.
I'd also be curious, and it would be nice if the planning commission could kind of look at it as our mixed-use district. What do we have in there right now? What do we have for number of residential homes? What do we have for number of vacation rental properties? What do we have for actual businesses? I'd be curious as to what's in that, because if all of a sudden everybody is getting rid of a home or selling a home and everything's becoming a vacation rental property or a business, then do we need to look at changing what that structure, what that zone really is? Because I'm not saying anything, people are really concerned, and obviously I think we need to take a look at as well with the county licensing VRBOs. I kind of think that people within the city should be doing that as well, so that we have an idea, a real process. It's not going to be expensive. It's $100, but we need to be able to look and say, these people are actually licensed, they're allowed to do it where they're at, and anybody that we know outside, then we need to deem what's going to be the penalty if you're operating in a way that you shouldn't be.
but I think what
A
you're.
lot of big issues just got put
I know.
on the table right there.
But what, I think the bottom line and the question that keeps coming back is, how do we really impact the issue of affordable housing in the community? And vacation rental properties are just one of the issues that impact that. It's lot densities, lot size requirements, accessory structures. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to that conversation. So singling out one over the other, I mean, I think it's the planning commission needs to look at it more comprehensively and
Yeah, where you started from though was we need to do some data collection so that we can do some data analysis.
Right.
And of course, the planning commission's not going to do data collection, and we might be able to do some, but that's seems like a kind of a step one for
That we
anybody
could
that's going to
hire an
help us out.
outside,
Is that we start gathering some data about, well, how many housing units do we have? How much, how big is a lot normally? Is it, an average of this size in this neighborhood and this size over here?
might be
How
interesting.
many accessory dwelling units are already out there? How many vacation rentals are out there? How many homes could potentially become vacation? I mean, just a lot of data that we don't really have available right now, and it's a significant amount of work to collect. But will be necessary to have this conversation.
So how do we move forward with finding someone that can help us with that? Because if
Talk to
it's,
ARDC, if that's the kind of thing they do.
Well, there's other people that'd be interested. I mean, what I've suggested is we actually talk to a few consultants about just trying to scope this out. Well, what would you do for us? And, what do you recommend? And then put an RFP together that says we want somebody to do that.
can we move forward? Can we direct you to move forward with doing that?
You can,
Make a motion.
Well, I think,
if you
like
want to expect,
And I'm not saying by the next meeting or even the
well,
end
the
of
planning
December,
commission,
but
I think, would love to see it happen sooner rather than later.
it keeps coming back with the plan.
Okay.
It's gonna have to come up. It's gonna have
But
to
I think
start
what
there.
Mike had said earlier is that if Jay, when you raised the question, if the council would actually formalize that to the planning commission, I think it takes it one step further, and the planning commission can start then having the discussion with Mike about how we proceed
I
to.
mean, it's already on my list. So now the question is, where is it on my list?
That
When does it
priority
become-
list,
Yeah.
is,
And if another item, for instance, that's on the priority list is this building, and
Right.
and Highway 61, and those are things that are taking a lot of time right now, and so it's adding this to that, and could I get it done by the end of the year? I think so. That's probably the most realistic.
I mean, I'm fine with that because I think it's, even if it's, sometime in January or the end of January, I'm okay with that. I know that we have a lot going on, but I think that it's telling people we are taking that step. We are really invested in looking at this and trying to figure it out. And I believe that that's almost what the majority of the people want. So I think that would be a great thing to do.
I'll make a motion to direct the Planning and Zoning Commission to begin looking for solutions for affordable housing via policy, understanding that work will,
Through land use.
through land use.
Through zoning
And zoning ordinance.
regulations.
Zoning
Just let
regulation.
'em go ahead and look at the whole thing.
And, yep, and understanding that will likely involve an upcoming RFP for assistance. So there's a motion.
Uh,
You gotta be sharp, Kelly. You gotta be sharp. Good motion and a second. Any further discussion?
You're hungry?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
He's got.
That's why he was looking at you.
Okay, motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay.
Awesome.
At the beginning of the year, whomever is our fifth, and you should start looking at dates and times to go to a council
I know
training.
you showed me, I think you showed me
Yeah.
something, there was February. February is probably more in my realm
Yep.
than January.
Yep. We have resources set aside for that.
Those
So-
of you that are veterans, they have programming for you as well.
Mhm.
I'd like to go back.
I think that it would be nice, just for all of us to get a little bit of a refresher, and to expand our understanding a little bit of what, the council commitment is.
And networking.
Yeah.
And it's really helpful for networking. I usually go to the Minnesota Mayor's Conference. I didn't go last year, but I usually go to that, and it is really valuable. I see a lot of mayors from the range, and it's really interesting and really good to talk to those people. Last thing that I have is, do we, as a council, want to start talking about snow emergency plowing kind of things? Because we said we were going to, but we didn't.
We
And
did.
Now the snow is
No,
going
we
to be
did.
here.
We started talking,
We
met
started talking.
with Kristen 6-8 weeks ago, and ball's in their court. So they were gonna have some conversations internally with their public safety team, and I'm expecting to hear back from her. I think we quickly agreed that it wasn't realistic to expect any changes to occur before this snowed this year. So,
Since it started on November 5th,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not keeping track.
You have a very clear tracker for that. Oh, there was something else I was going to ask you specifically
You know where to find me.
in order to find you.
December 26th, does that work for everybody, I wondered? Because that's right after Christmas?
Here's what we normally
I
do
will be
that
gone.
meeting. Approve supervisor salary adjustments, approve the final levy and budget, and that's it. And I'm not gonna be there. And so we can pick a date anytime after the 12th that people have available, do a 10 or 15 minute meeting, or 3 minute if
5-minute
you want.
meeting.
Yeah.
I will be gone on the 26th anyway.
Me
so,
So that, unless, are you around on the 26th?
I would be here, but, if we want to set a separate meeting date, that's fine too.
I leave on the, I leave on the 22nd, Saturday,
that's when I leave too.
so,
When are you back?
the 31st.
So we should probably do it the week of the 17th, 17th, 18th, 19th,
19th, maybe.
19th. You want to do it that'd be
Back to Wednesday,
back to
Wednesday.
back.
Just have to take care of the business.
Is that
We don't
what
have
you
to
say,
meet at
lessons and
6:30.
trails?
It might be, Bethlehem has a super lessons and carols.
Yeah,
that
that's
I
really
just-
cool.
We
I
can
like
meet
it.
at
Um,
5.
Oh, yeah,
We
well,
do it at
We just have to prove
We could do it at
approve the
noon.
levy. And
You mean at noon?
It's like,
Yeah.
Do it at noon.
But I think we're going to resolve that at our next meeting.
That's the idea.
Well, you're
That's
gonna-
truth and taxation.
You're gonna resolve, hopefully, or give us some good
12th.
Our next
direction
meeting at the 12th.
next week.
That's
And
what
then
we're
on the
trying to-
12th, we're gonna have a final draft that probably won't need to make any changes to.
Yeah.
Correct.
okay.
It's just really
I'm game whenever, if we
stupid way
could
to-
do it, if the 19th is fine, if we could do it, because I think lessons and carols is like at 6:30 or 7.
Well, let's talk about doing it earlier then. Do we want to set it now, or do we want to set it on the
On the 12th?
Yeah, whatever.
I'm fine doing-
Tentatively kind of plan for the 19th that evening, and then
19th.
figure out a time when we come back on the 12th?
19th at 5, unless you tell me otherwise. How about
19th
that?
We could do it
5.
earlier if you want to even do it earlier.
Noon.
Well,
Just 4:30, or, doesn't make any difference.
I can be down here by 5. I usually work till 5, so
Okay.
I'm up over the hill, but
All right.
I'm sure they'll let me go a little early.
Just want to keep-
I'll have
you
a
don't,
month.
you don't want to do it over lunch?
That'll be my 1-month anniversary that day. Maybe they'll
Oh,
let me
hot
leave a
damn.
little early.
Wow.
You don't want to do it over lunch? You can just come down over lunch. And,
It's such a pain to run down and go
Okay.
back up.
Maybe we should
5
meet up
o'clock.
there.
Yeah! Do a tour?
Wow. We could do that.
5?
5 o'clock here,
5 o'clock?
unless we hear otherwise. All right, anything else?
Just wanted to let you know, I attended a SIMPA meeting today with Commissioner Wilkes to talk about decarbonization of electricity. Just, if you remember Jay from Fresh Energy that invited to town and had some conversations here locally, she was there and was kind of the guest speaker, and it sounds like there'll be further conversations, and so I think it was really well received.
Did SIMPA have any comments about the federal study that was just released?
On Friday?
Yeah.
Well, I think just as a credit to the folks in that room, many of them have already read it, which is pretty impressive.
Oh.
They're definitely in the business, and they're really good at what they do.
What time, sorry, the 6th was the day that we agreed to?
Yep. So that's
1 o'clock.
next Thursday,
And that's at 1?
1 to 2:30.
Okay.
Here?
We'll send out here in this room. We're going to send out, hopefully by Friday, but if not, certainly by Monday, some budget materials, a budget work session.
Patrick, will you be supplying us with Christmas cookies?
There you go. It's done. And then the
That's
other,
the attitude.
other
Good answer.
update was that we held a pedestrian plan meeting as well this week.
Yeah.
And Kelly, one of the comments you said earlier about a resident that talked to you about other projects that they were hoping we would focus on.
Was it 1 o'clock?
I suspect you'd
Yeah,
hear
it's
similar
1 to
kind of
2:30,
comments
I
about
guess.
this. One of the things that we're talking about doing is, for the next round of public process for this, trying to figure out a way to get input from folks about what their infrastructure priorities are. Normally, when we do infrastructure planning, and we meaning any government agency in the world,
Yep.
we're leaving it up to engineers and making a determination based on condition and usage and really nothing else. But if people are perceiving that there's issues about it, I would really love to continue that conversation with those folks if you get an opportunity to figure out what are the things that they're perceiving that are not getting done that they thought should have been getting done. And if we can figure out a way to do that with this pedestrian plan, then it'd be my vision anyway to do that for all of our infrastructure and try to figure how do we keep the public involved in that conversation in a useful way.
Or do we pick the bumpiest roads or biggest roads with biggest potholes and start?
That's pretty much what we do. I mean, that's what we have done and are continuing to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's hard to communicate a plan to the public because we do these projects every 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
But there ought to be a way for people to stay involved in the conversation even when there's not a big road project going on. So I'm really curious what those folks are going to say about that.
Great. Anything else? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night,
Chris.
everybody.
See you, Chris.
Good night,
Bye.
Chris.
Thanks, Chris.